President Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us. That will never ever happen.
Canada's Prime Minister has just publicly blasted President Trump following a dramatic and heated Oval Office fight. Yes, you heard that right. In a shocking and utterly surreal moment in international politics, Prime Minister Mark Carney stood face to face with US President Donald Trump and calmly but decisively dismantled his outrageous talk of annexing Canada. What began as another round of Trump's wild 51st state fantasy quickly turned into a diplomatic masterclass delivered by Carney, who didn't raise his voice, didn't lose his cool, but left no doubt: Canada is not for sale. The reaction? Canadians and Americans alike erupted in applause, stunned not only by Trump's bizarre comments, but also by how thoroughly and quietly Carney put him in his place. With the two nations watching, one leader acted like a statesman, the other like a man unraveling on the world stage. Carney's bold and articulate response didn't just push back, it sent shockwaves across diplomatic circles, exposing deep concerns about Trump's behavior and America's credibility under his leadership. What do you think? Should world leaders tolerate this kind of rhetoric from allies, or call it out like Carney did? Before we dive deeper, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the African Web, where we bring you the stories mainstream media misses. Africa's rise, global politics, and truth with no filter. Relations between the United States and Canada have been rocky during Trump's second term, with tensions simmering over trade, tariffs, diplomacy, and now, shockingly, territorial integrity. What started as typical bluster from Trump turned into an unsettling campaign talking point: that Canada, America's closest ally and neighbor, might eventually become the 51st state. The rhetoric grew more intense and surreal, with Trump and his surrogates regularly floating the idea at rallies and press briefings, as if absorbing a sovereign country was just another business deal. This wasn't just dismissed by Canadians, it infuriated them. What made matters worse was the silence from most Republican senators, who appeared too afraid of Trump's wrath to push back on the dangerous narrative. That public anger didn't stay quiet. It boiled over into Canada's political arena, helping to propel Mark Carney, respected former Bank of Canada and Bank of England governor, into the Prime Minister's seat. Seen as a rational, composed leader, Carney promised during his campaign that respect for Canadian sovereignty would be a top priority. His promise resonated deeply across the political spectrum, especially among younger voters concerned about foreign interference. By the time his first meeting with Trump was scheduled, tensions were already at a boiling point. The stage was set, not just for diplomacy, but for a showdown. It all came to a head in the White House in what was supposed to be a routine bilateral meeting. Instead, it quickly turned into a moment that will be studied in international relations for years to come. Trump, seated in his usual performative posture, doubled down on his idea that the US and Canada were always meant to be together. He bizarrely described the US-Canada border as a ruler-drawn straight line that should be erased to make way for unity under one flag.
When you get rid of that artificially drawn line, somebody drew that line many years ago with like a ruler, just a straight line right across the top of the country. When you look at that beautiful formation when it's together, I'm a very artistic person, but when I looked at that beauty, I said, that's the way it was meant to be.
For most world leaders, such a statement would spark chaos. Carney, however, sat calmly, listening intently, and then he responded. Without raising his voice, without using a single insult, Carney rejected the idea with absolute clarity. He reminded Trump and the world that Canada's sovereignty was not up for negotiation. Not now, not ever. He pointed to the Canadian people's overwhelming rejection of such ideas, highlighting how even talk of annexation is seen as offensive and imperialist. Throughout the exchange, Trump became visibly agitated, stumbling over words and throwing out random economic stats, while Carney remained unshaken.
Well, if I may, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale.
This was not just a clash of policy. It was a collision between fantasy and reality, between ego and intellect, between bluster and diplomacy. The clips from that meeting have since gone viral, with many praising Carney for what they're calling a masterclass in political restraint. Mark Carney made several things abundantly clear. First and foremost, he said the idea of Canada becoming the 51st state is not just unrealistic, it's insulting. He stated unequivocally that Canada is not for sale, likening it to properties that, no matter how tempting, are simply never available on the market. Some places are never for sale, he told Trump directly. We're sitting in one right now. The message was clear. National identity and independence aren't bargaining chips. Carney emphasized Canada's economic strength and its productive partnership with the US, reminding the world that Canada is America's largest trading partner. But he drew a hard line. Partnership does not mean submission. He stressed the need to invest in Canada's economy, focus on building national infrastructure, and protect Canadian interests without compromising them for American approval. He didn't just speak for Canada, he echoed the unspoken concerns of millions of Americans watching their president embarrass himself yet again. He ended his remarks with a subtle but powerful dig, stating that Canada's best path forward lies in focusing on what it can build internally: projects, jobs, productivity, not in surrendering its borders to someone else's vision of power. What made this moment so impactful wasn't just what was said, it was how it was said. Trump, the sitting president of the United States, appeared delusional and increasingly disconnected from diplomatic norms. His obsession with redefining international borders sounded less like policy and more like fantasy. His scattered statements, inability to stay on topic, and refusal to acknowledge basic political boundaries left observers questioning his cognitive fitness. Even longtime allies in Europe and Asia have reportedly expressed unease behind closed doors, worried about the implications of an erratic US foreign policy driven by personal whims rather than strategic interest. In contrast, Carney was cool, coherent, and commanding. Three qualities many have found lacking in Trump's recent public appearances. In fact, several American commentators have remarked that Carney represented US interests and democratic values more effectively than Trump himself. The Prime Minister of another country became, in that moment, the adult in the room. Some media outlets even questioned whether Trump had effectively handed Carney the moral authority of the Oval Office, simply by failing to lead with clarity or reason. This meeting will likely have lasting consequences, not just for US-Canada relations, but for how world leaders respond to Trump going forward. The time of tiptoeing around his rhetoric may be over. Mark Carney has set a new standard: challenge nonsense with facts, ego with poise, and chaos with calm. Mark Carney's calm but firm stand against Donald Trump's annexation rhetoric wasn't just a win for Canada, it was a reminder that diplomacy still matters. In a world increasingly distorted by propaganda and bravado, Carney showed what real leadership looks like. His words echoed far beyond that Oval Office, resonating with those desperate for sanity in global politics. Trump, meanwhile, walked away from the meeting looking embarrassed, weakened, and out of touch, not just with Canada, but with reality itself. Do you think more leaders should take Carney's approach when dealing with Trump? Or will silence from allies only continue to empower this kind of dangerous rhetoric? If you want more powerful international stories like this, subscribe to The African Web, where we spotlight global movements, powerful voices, and the stories that deserve your attention. Don't forget to like, share, and turn on notifications.